walk with me. And as we wander down the crowded street, even if we're shuffling our feet, you make me never want to miss a beat. We're meant to be. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, there's nowhere else I wanna go. Hold my hand, fall in love with footprints in the sand, and kiss each other while we watch the band. And everyone who knows us understands we're meant to be. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, there's nowhere else I wanna go. So walk with me as we wander down the crowded street, even if we're shuffling our feet. You make me never wanna miss a beat, never miss a beat. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, there's nowhere else I wanna go. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, there's nowhere else I wanna go. So walk with me, walk with me.
Good evening, Cedar Falls. Welcome to tonight's regularly scheduled Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, April 6, 2026. Call this meeting in order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Schultz,
Here.
Lotta,
Here.
Nagel,
Here.
Hallbaker,
Here.
Fairbanks,
Here.
Chrisman,
Here.
Dunn,
Here.
all present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It moves us to item number 1, a lost presentation with Director Chase Schrage. Chase, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Council, tonight I'll be talking about the local option sales tax program. Some of the considerations since goal setting, if you recall, we had a brief conversation about the I'm going to say the allocation of funds in the local option sales tax program during goal setting. The council did express some interest in that, so I will cover that here with you tonight. Some of the considerations we took into account is obviously the history of the program, impacts on quality of life, impacts on streets, and then we have our recent strategic plan. Some of the key focus areas in the strategic plan were well-maintained infrastructure as well as enhanced recreational amenities. The last bullet there, it may come into play, but right now it's looking like maybe it will be removed as part of a bill, but it has been included in a previous rendition of the bill that we could increase the local option sales tax from 1% to 1.5%, but it did state in there that you could not change the allocation of funds towards street maintenance. So I think the latest word we had was we believe it's going to be removed, but just it's still floating out there. So. A little bit of the history. So the current language, what we call the purpose of the option tax, states that 100% of the funds from each year will be allocated towards reconstruction, repair, or replacement of existing streets. So it can't be used for any new streets, just the existing streets. It was established in 1991, and it's been voted on numerous times since then. The most recent ones were in 2013 and 2024. The 2024 vote did include no sunset date, so they removed any expiration dates at that time. Currently, it generates approximately $7 million per year. The total amount that we've accrued since 1991 is approximately 148 million, and you can see there the miles of pavement that we've either repaired or replaced. This chart is to illustrate the current state of the CIP and our cash flow. So you can see the estimated revenues from the option tax at $7 million a year, and then the programmed capital improvement expenses for each given year. I would like to make a note about years 29, 30, and 31. That is due to Highway 58 in Green Hill, which is a $14 million allocation locally towards that DOT project for that. So that's really where our cash flow takes a hit in those 3 years. But you can see we always every year when we do the CIP, Jen and I meet and talk about the option tax program over that 5 years. We want to ensure that within that 5 years that our balance is still positive. We actually had a practice that we'd keep $4 to $5 million in there in case that option tax were not to move forward in a given year. If we were in the middle of a Main Street reconstruction project, that we had enough funding to finish the project. So you can see there that we are slightly negative, but basically it is balanced currently in the CIP. And we'll get to this later when we show the new allocations if we were to go to a proposed 75-25 split. So again, I went over the current language. What the proposed language would be is that a minimum of 75% of the revenue each year would go towards the reconstruction, repair, and replacement of existing streets, while up to 25% could be reused for parks, recreational projects, arts and culture development within the city limits. And again, we're open to discussion on what this language was. This is what was discussed at goal setting. So I think Jen and I worked on what we thought might we would move forward. So that's open for discussion yet. So the proposed 75-25 split of the approximately $7 million that we receive each year would be about $5.2 million towards the streets as it is today, and then we could use up to $1.75 million towards parks and recreational projects. Some of the impacts of the changes, what it would have on quality of life. These aren't in any particular order for priority or anything like that. These are just highlighting some of the larger projects that we have in the CIP. As you can see off to the right, some of them are proposed funded projects and some are unmet. You can see off to the right there, some of those towards the bottom are unmet needs, but we have the Hearst splash pad, what we would call the specialty park, skate park or action park, dog park, and we have the indoor turf complex as well as the outdoor athletic fields project. We have the Golf Pro Shop, Rec Center expansion, and the Falls Aquatic Center. Some of the changes that would take place in streets if we were to make this modification to the funding allocation is really that our 5-year pavement management program would turn into a 6, because we're basically taking a street out of each given year and moving it back. A lot of the impacts for those first few years, the Oakland Avenue, Cherry Lane, Edwards, and even for that matter, West Widgewood Drive, those are all in the North Cedar Heights area. So if you recall, we kind of set up a 5-year program in the North Cedar Heights area. A lot of the impacts would be to those streets. And then you can see we have Terrace Drive in 2030 as well. That's actually split over 2 years. And then 2031, Barnett Drive, College, and Olive Street. These photos are solely to just illustrate quality of pavement and repairs. Just wanted to, these specific streets that I'm showing tonight are not even in our 5-year program. So we do have some out there that are, I'm gonna call them more or less smaller areas. They're not entire blocks of streets, but they need to be addressed. As you can see, there's a lot of patching on them already. But they're not significant enough to move into our program. We would have to do a different type of maintenance for these if we're going to try to extend them out that 6 to 7 year timeline now. Just more photos of existing patching and streets that are not programmed currently. So our annual reconstruction program, we've been utilizing approximately $4 million per year. And when I say annual reconstruction and restoration, that does include the North Cedar Heights area as well. The original 5-year program, as I stated, would transition into more or less a 6-year program by making this funding allocation change. No additional streets obviously would move into that 6 years. If we have new streets that we're trying to program, they would be programmed in year 7. And that's not taking into account any type of construction inflation. You know, as we went through the pandemic, there was a lot of construction inflation that we have to move streets back just due to funding. So if bids come in high a certain year, we might have to spread the program out even more. So keep that in mind. And then, as I stated, that Highway 58 and Green Hill Road's currently programmed to utilize $14 million of option tax, and that would begin in 2029 through 2030, 2031. It's about a 3-year project. And then with that, if we continue to move forward with that project, it's likely that we would have to bond for a large portion of it because we wouldn't have the option tax funds on hand at that time. And the chart below is a similar chart you've seen before, but it's taken into account the 75-25 split. So you can see in years 26 and 27, it remains at 7 million, and then 28 through 31, it would be the 5.2, with 1.75 going towards other types of projects. So you can see there the cash flow is negative, approximately $7 million. So we do know if we continue to move forward with all projects planned in the CIP, we would have to bond. And as it relates to other streets, because I know they've been brought up at goal setting for one, I think Councilmember Fairbanks brought up a couple intersections along Green Hill Road. Those are currently not even programmed in the CIP. They are in the unmet needs on the CIP, but if those projects were to move forward, it would either have to be grant funding or additional bonding capacity for those. And I think I had a couple notes here if anyone's interested on the bonding. I believe, if I recall from Director Rodenbeck's presentation on the budget, I believe it was 4 cents per $1 million of bonding, which equates to $2.17 on a $100,000 home. tried to weigh the pros and cons of making these changes. Obviously, the pros would be increases available funding for quality of life projects. With currently the Iowa code only allows you to bond up to $910,000, I believe, for those types of projects. Street projects do not have any bonding capacity caps on them. Obviously, improved quality of life amenities, less dependent on private fundraising to initiate some of these projects, and then the potential increase to local option sales tax and hotel motel funding due to the tourism attraction for these types of parks projects. And the cons are pretty obvious: delays in street infrastructure and repairs, potential increased future costs, inflation as it relates to construction, deterioration of roadways could lead to safety risks, and then potential increase to bond sales for critical projects, as I stated before, for Green Hill and Highway 58. This is a similar slide to what you had seen at goal setting on how the process would work. The City Council on its own would have to pass a resolution with the new language for the purpose, and to place it on the ballot in September. It would go to a public vote in September, and that resolution has to be done 84 days in advance of that vote. And if the ballot measure were to pass, the funds could be redirected on January 1st or July 1st, depending on the vote that you would, the ballot you would put it on. And it does not have to be for property tax relief. So this is kind of the schedule that we laid out for that. We would propose to potentially bring a resolution forward, depending on the language that we talk about tonight, bring it forward on June 1st, setting that election date for the September 8th. And then any funds could be redirected as of January 1st, but we would be proposing to wait till the next current fiscal year. So that would be in July of 2027. So right now it's open to discussion, but ultimately we would be looking for a motion to direct staff to bring back a resolution at that June 1st meeting, redirecting the funding allocation or the purpose language for the 75-25 split. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or open to discussion on any one of the topics or the language. Or
Great. Thanks, Chase. And then, Chase, part of the reason with waiting until June was that we were waiting for this current legislative session to be done just on the off chance that some of this flushes out itself, correct?
Correct. Yep. We might have our hands tied if something were to move forward and we couldn't reallocate the purpose. Yep.
Great. Okay, open up for council discussion for Chase before we open up for public comments, as we will be taking a motion on this. Any questions for Chase?
I do have a question. So let's say the council adopts this and we have the election in September, and citizens of Cedar Falls say no. Do we revert back to our old 1% lost, or is that a no period to lost?
The change would be rejected. It wouldn't nullify our previous purpose statement.
Okay, just want to make sure what the risks were.
Other questions?
So if we opt to do up to 25%, that decision to use the 25% or how we allocate those funds happens at goal setting?
I think we see like through goal setting in the CIP process. We'd probably have to do that then every year to just kind of figure out where everyone would be at.
Correct. Yep.
Mr. Fairbanks?
Chase, I assume we use all the funds every year, I would assume, correct? Or mostly? Technically?
Technically,
Supposed
yes,
to be.
but
Yeah.
the practice we've done in the past is we don't allocate all $7 million each year. We probably use around $4 million, and we keep, $2.5 to $3 million back each year. Basically, bank it in an account for some of these larger projects, Main Street, Union Road that's coming up, significant projects that we'll need $10 million plus for.
So you are allowed, so basically you are allowed to bank that money and
Yep.
carry it forward.
Yep,
So
correct. Yep.
If we, want to fund the 58 Green Hill, we'd be able to bank money towards that, continue to do that. Would that be correct, technically?
Technically, that is correct, but that is a DOT project on the DOT timeline, so
Understand,
that the
yeah.
timeline's already been set for that, yep.
Yeah, I think you answered one of my questions, the negative balance. If we have a negative balance, we'd have to bond for whatever we're doing.
Correct.
I see good points and bad points with this, but I do have some issues.
Let's save the,
Oh.
let's go with questions for this part. We'll do public comment, then we'll bring it back
Very
for
good.
the rest.
That's all I got. Thanks.
I did want to just clarify one thing for Councilperson. When you mentioned, though, about banking, that is what we're doing right now for Green Hill and 58. So if things would change, that would change that. We'd either have to bond for that or do different, delay other street projects, so we didn't have to bond for it, whatever. So I just wanted to make sure that was
Yeah, so
clear.
this slide here currently shows the current structure today, that we basically have a balanced CIP, which would include that intersection. When we go to move into the new split, if that were to move forward, this is the balance, so we would have to bond significantly for the project.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yeah, Chase, so if we were, hypothetically, but it sounds like you're proposing that we would have to bond if we would go to 75%. Let's say that already had happened, will we be looking at 1233 tonight instead of 1229?
Correct. So every year, it'd be 4 cents more because it would, we would price all the bonds over 10 years or 12 years, whatever. So you'd have that additional bond payment. Yep.
But again, that's assuming you use the full amount.
Correct. Yep. Yep. You could decide to just keep using it for street. I think that's why the wording is how it is it's not saying you have to use 25%. I think Councilperson Chrisman makes a good point. It's if you would choose to do that.
Whereas now we know it's going to the street, where
Correct.
for that, again, hypothetically, if I got 25% that I can spend on stuff that I really like a park or a splash pad, I'm probably going to get some influence to spend it there. So the reality of what that change would be. So.
Chase, am I correct? I had a question posed to me. If we were to move forward with this resolution, this wouldn't result in us going back and assessing individual residents for street projects. Is that correct?
No, that is correct. There's really two mechanisms to pay for infrastructure street projects outside of the option tax program. It's bonding for them or special assessments, in which you're referring to.
Right.
But usually we generally stay away from that. We don't want to entertain that.
When was the last time we were in that?
We actually have one going on right now with West 23rd. That's through the state, though, so it's not the citizens that are involved in that one.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
What, and I know it's CIPs in front of me here, but what's the realistic number we're looking at to make a dent in parks? Does anybody, or Jen maybe?
Well, I think that's why Chase wanted to show that 1.7 million is the 25%.
Sure.
And then I think Stephanie put together kind of all of those, that slide with all those things on the CIP right there. So I think it is, could 1.7 million a year make a dent in some of those? Sure. Yeah, it could. And I think that's what we were trying to show. We understand the pro is it could probably jumpstart some of these projects.
But right now, you could only bond for $910K.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's actually maybe up to 935 now. They actually have a CPI inflation factor now that goes in it, but it's roughly around that 900,000.
And that would be annually
No, per project.
or per project?
Per project.
Okay.
Yep, so if like the rec center or one of those projects goes over 3 years, it's still per project.
Okay.
But you could do 3 different projects and bond for 900 and some thousand.
Any other questions for Chase? Great, thank you. We'll open it up for public comments since we are going to take a motion on this. I don't see anyone here in the chambers. We'll pause for just a moment for the foyer. All right, seeing none, we'll close that for public comment, bring it back to council for any additional discussion. I guess in my mind, the only other piece I would add is we're looking at some of these projects that we've committed to through the Parks Master Plan, everything else. I do think we're going to have to come up with some funding for this one way or the other. And I do think that there's also an opportunity here, we'll use the turf facility as an example. If that were to open up, I think we also need to understand some of the return on investment we may have with that through lost dollars, whether that's the hotel, motel, or anything else. I mean, I think there's additional opportunities there for revenue if we do get one of those projects up. So while yes, we may ultimately be spending up to X percent per year on a project like that, I think the ROI is still definitely a potential there. And I think it's still worth referencing that this proposal says up to a certain amount. Doesn't mean we have to. And I think that brings it back to council through goal setting and through our conversations with the budget and CIP is to say, hey, we need to prioritize this one way or the other. But the point's very well taken that moving from a 5-year to a 6-year plan, when the slides that you showed there, it looked like one of them was maybe Green Hill and Round, and I'm not sure where the curb project was. But those aren't even on this plan yet. So your point's well taken. I know Councilmember Dunn has said repeatedly that one thing we don't hear about is the disrepair of our roads. Yeah. And that's because of this program. So I think there's pros and cons no matter what. I think that slide really identified that. So additional comment, discussion?
Shouldn't we have a motion first and see?
We do need a motion.
Yeah.
We have a motion to approve giving direction to staff to, Chase, you want to pull that slide back up? Direct staff to draft a resolution modifying the existing language to include up to 25% to be used on parks, recreational projects, art and culture development within the city limits. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Now we can have discussion.
Now we can have discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Hallbaker.
Okay, may I speak then?
Please.
My position is kind of the same as it was at goal setting. This idea that it can be up to 25%, we will spend it with that capacity there. So we can just, eventually that 25% will be gone for roads. We're barely limping along. We have a good plan, but I also think that would make budgeting even more difficult because you have to assume that 25% won't always be there, which means that you're really operating on a budget that is without that 25% because you don't know what council is going to do year to year, who's going to commit what funds to what. And so the only way to have a stable path forward is to assume it's gone. And so that's a pretty big whack to the ability for us to maintain our streets and to a greater, we have always found ways to fund creatively quality of life projects, whether or not it's through grants. I know we have differing opinions on how much public kick-in we should have for those different projects. But to sacrifice the street repairs and reconstruction, which ultimately is a safety issue, as was pointed out in the slide, I'm not in favor of that change. Now, one argument is that it's not our decision. We have to put it to the city, and if the citizens say, my view is how they feel about it, then they can reject it. Or if they say, no, we think Hallbaker, you're wrong, then at least we do have the will of the city. So.
I agree with, again, I've already said it, but if you're given the 25%, that's what we're going to spend, is the 25% on those. And to Mr. Hallbaker's point, then it's gone forever. If the citizens I've talked to, they want to see parks, they want to see splash pads and other things, and we have found ways to create recreation. But maybe there's a better appetite for a smaller percentage that we would move forward. But
and we could certainly entertain that option as well. As it sits right now, with the motion on the floor is for 25%. We can amend that to whatever number council so chooses.
I do have a question in that regard. Is it okay? What's it cost us to do the election?
Well, I feel like a citywide election costs around 25 to 30,000, I want to say, because I think we budget 50,000 usually every other year for the election, but that also takes into account oftentimes we have runoffs.
Okay.
So that's why I want to say a citywide election is around that 25, 30,000, I think.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Mr. Fairbanks.
I received several emails opposing that we do this. However, I don't necessarily take that as an end-all, be-all, but I kind of look at this like it was a contract with the citizens to keep our streets when they were at their worst, and now we've improved into the point where we have some of the best streets. And I would think we would better off just to leave it that way so that the city citizens have trust in what we're doing, that we're not pulling money out of it. And the first time we have pothole complaints, you know, we haven't been taking care of them, as you well know. But I'd be in favor of just leaving it the way that it is. And I have a question. If they would go to a vote, is it a 50-50 vote or 60-40?
It's the 1 over 50%. So it doesn't have to pass by 60% like a lot of times the school bond votes.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I'm pretty sure that's when we asked the county that's the answer we got, that it, yeah.
And is another question, Jen, is this, some of the things that were listed, that Chase listed here, aren't they in our budget that's upcoming already or not?
For the park and rec projects or the street?
Park and Recs.
Park and Rec. Well, you'll see on the slide, a couple of them are. Some of them, though, as you can see, are listed as unfunded.
Right.
So those first few that have a number, like say how it says CIP number 35, 69, those are in the budget, on the CIP. Now, they have in there, that's not necessarily all city funds. Like I'll pick the Hearst Center, the very first one. That's also relying on private funding to pay for that. But you'll also see there's ones on there that are on the unmet needs. In other words, they did not fit into our current budgeting on our 5-year plan for the CIP. So it's a little bit of a mix on the slide.
So if I got you to fund the golf pro shop, I could be persuaded to change my vote. Just kidding.
So Jen, piggyback on that, so if I'm hearing you correctly, really, no matter what, we may be looking at having to bond for, it's either going to be bonding for some of these projects, quality life-wise, or likely bonding for Green Hill Road.
Sure, correct, because one of the things, now, actually, probably all of those projects listed up there, probably, a lot of them had bonding in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll pick the Hearst, we put the 900 and some thousand to bond for that. Now, we also, though, did that with the assumption that we're only bonding for $4 million a year, or the 4.5, that. Point being, it's in our budget on the 5-year plan, because we like to keep that bonding at a stable amount. So, yes, any year you could choose to bond for more, just knowing the property taxes will go up. But, that's why we always put the CIP together, is to try to have that every other year, selling replacement debt with that extra $500,000 that the council's kind of directed us over the last couple of years to help get some of those projects.
I'm just going to go back to, again, for the amount of time and energy and money we spent on a parks master plan that identified how many different quality of life projects that, from citizen feedback, they wanted to see. We're going to have to find a way to fund this one way or the other. That's where this is somewhat appetizing to me. I'm not married to 25%. And I agree with Councilmember Hallbaker's point. If you are given the purse strings for 25%, the likelihood that we're going to spend 25% is relatively high. So your point's well taken. But I do think we're going to have to come up with a funding mechanism for some of these projects. And again, I'll go back to my original comment with the turf complex, for example. I think it brings more funds back in. And so I don't know that while we might lose that, quote unquote, lose or spend that 25%, it doesn't mean that some of those funds can't be replenished. Additional comments, discussion?
Mr.
Member
Mayor Pro
Dunn.
Tem?
Yes.
As I've said before, I'm not for this. I can respect the process, but I'm in opposition to this. While I agree that, obviously the Parks Master Plan is important, we invested in it, we want to make things happen. I also, okay, so as you know, I like to break things down into like a real world time. So I think of my own household and like in times of a tight budget, which we all are fully aware that we are in a tight budget that could be getting tighter. But we have concentrated on what I'll call the infrastructure of our life, which is our home. We need a home to be safe, and all the money that goes into running the home as far as electricity, water, and maintenance, and transportation to get to our work. Those are the things we absolutely need. So there's times where my husband or even myself maybe wants a boat, or we want a recreational vehicle to go camp in. While I appreciate those are great for my quality of life, as far as, I get to go kick it on the water or in a park, what really makes me feel safe is knowing that my infrastructure is taken care of. And so to me, it's kind of like that. Like, it's not to say that I don't want any of these. I would love all of these things. And, I can also appreciate that we have a lot of great things currently. And those things didn't just happen because, some of those things took time. And I know that gets frustrating for people, but that's kind of the way of the world. And we heard the other night we went to the Cedar Valley Awards, and it was brought up how many of the great things we have are from public-private partnerships, and especially at this time in our lives, and as far as the city and the state of Iowa, those are even more important. And I've heard it a few times that, well, people don't move to Cedar Falls for streets and sewer. I don't know about that. I mean, honestly, I get like a lot of pleasure driving around and noticing that my infrastructure is real great, especially when I'm leaving somewhere or have been somewhere that's not great. So I kind of push back on that a little bit. I will say that I bet people leave their cities because of poor streets and sewers. I mean, if I wake up every day and I know my sewer's not backing up and I can roll through town in safety and without damage to myself or my vehicle, that feels pretty good. My other concern is this is an election that's proposed the day after Labor Day. And I always think back to most people are rolling through life and not even paying attention to us in this body. And they just love this town because of what it is. So, I just kind of always think about those folks because they matter just as much as all the folks who are paying attention. And yes, I can appreciate the process. If ultimately it goes to a vote, I'll obviously respect the vote. But I just worry, like, are people going to even know that the day after Labor Day that there's a pretty important vote in the community? And that's just, I guess I'm just talking, so I hope people, if this does go to a referendum or a vote, I hope people are paying attention and start talking about it. So I want all the fun things, all the park and arts and culture and all those things, but I can wait for those things, especially right now when we're in the situation we are in and it's likely to get tighter. So I like the current policy and I wish we would stick with that. Anyway, I'll stop rambling.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Chrisman.
Just to maybe play opposite to Kelly's comments, I think one thing is this isn't a home, it's more like a business. And so sometimes you do have to spend money to make money. I think to Mayor Pro Tem's point, we have some of these things on this list that are either unmet or going to, we have to figure out a plan for how they're going to be paid for that could really bring in a lot of money. And I don't think that our streets are going to bring in a lot of money, mainly because you don't have to spend any money on them. Like, they don't cost to drive on when you drive on them in the moment. So they're not bringing in bucks. They're not staying at hotels to experience our roads. I also think that if you look at the population study that was recently done by Cedar Valley, the comment that they received from the people who left our community said that they left because they didn't see a place for themselves. Now, a lot of that does apply to the jobs and the wages that are available in our community, but I also think it applies to some of the things on this list. multi-use athletic fields or the rec center or the pro shop. If you're a young person and you're more, athletically inclined, then you don't really have a great place here in this community. Or if you have young kids and you're not able to take them to a splash pad or a good skate park or enroll them in, there's the summer camp that's at the Hearst Center. It's pretty small because they can't accommodate any more kids. So I think there's a lot of reasons why people leave communities, and we see that people are leaving our community, or at least they're going to school and they're not sticking around. And so that concerns me, and I think that if we allocate this funding, the funding will grow. I think we will move that $7 million up because we're going to be able to accomplish some of these projects faster. Now, I understand that we're going from a 5-year road plan to a street plan to a 6-year street plan. I have to say, I don't really know what that looks like. I mean, how that would affect, say, the street outside of my house. I don't know if I would notice the difference between having my street repaired this year or next year. But, I think that people will notice if there is a park in their community or in their neighborhood that wasn't there last year. If the splash pad is built or the dog park goes in or the multi-use athletic fields happen, they will notice them. But the streets go unnoticed. And I understand people may complain, but I think that you will have a lot more happy people and maybe a handful more road complaints if we move forward with funding these projects.
Thank you. I assume you're referring to the young athletic golfer from Ward 5? Is
Yes,
that okay?
exactly.
Assumed as much. Additional council comments? Okay, seeing none, I believe this will be a voice vote. Attorney Rogers, is that correct? Okay, this will be a voice vote on, again, if we can put the motion up one more time, please. Directing staff to draft a resolution modifying the existing language to include up to 25% be used on parks, recreational projects, art and cultural development within the city limits. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
We may need to do a show of hands for aye and for nay. That motion fails. Okay. That will end tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We'll be back for our regularly scheduled council meeting at 7 p.m. Thank you.